Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second panel of today's Sustainability Days events. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our panel on building a career working in sustainability. And while our panelists are making their way up, I just wanted to remind you that starting at 1, there's a series of 5-minute Ignite talks happening in the Ballroom B, I think. Those are 5-minute talks. If you've ever tried to give a talk, you know that giving a 5-minute talk is much harder than giving a 50-minute talk, and those are always entertaining. Those are by people from all across campus talking about the many sustainability efforts that are happening here on campus. There's also an event right after ours, right across the hall, and a few more events happening throughout the day, culminating from 5 to 7 in a sustainability fair out on the plaza between here and the rec center. So on behalf of Sonoma State's Sustainability Committee and its director, Paul Draper, welcome to our panel on building a career in sustainability. I'm just going to very quickly introduce the panelists and then turn it over to the moderator. So our moderator is Dr. Adele Santana from SSU School of Business and Economics. And our panelists are Trey Then, who's the executive director of Daily Acts, which is a Petaluma nonprofit, Lucy Hernandez, who is the principal at Lucy Consulting and formerly director of programs at the Community Action Partnership Sonoma, Rebecca Simonson, who is senior power analyst at Sonoma Clean Power, Jake McKenzie, who is vice mayor of Rohnert Park, and Justin Witt, who is a environmental planner at Belgian Race. So I'll turn it over to Professor Santana.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. And I want to thank the organizers of this day for this particular panel. This was designed for students, for you, who are going to be the next generation to really make things work on this planet. Like it or not, we won't be here to do all that we're doing now in 15, 20 years. And so this is for you. My suggestion as I coordinate this time with you here is that we listen from this amazing panel that we have here. Is really a privilege to have these professionals with us here. And they will talk a little bit about who they are and what they do and how they see careers in sustainability from very different perspectives. And if you could please take note of your questions so that after they speak, we'll pass on the word to you. And that is probably the most important part of this event, when you have a chance to talk with our panelists. Without more ado, I will pass the word on to our first panelist, Jake.
Well, it's good to be here in front of you. I've done this gig before at Sonoma State in terms of talking about careers in sustainability and what happens in the afterlife, that life after college. What I'm here to tell you is that you have taken the first major step by being here at Sonoma State, by heading towards a degree, and I don't know where all you guys are studying. How many of you are in the sort of environmental planning studies area? Okay, and any engineering types or chemistry types or anybody like that? Okay, let's see if there's any liberal arts folks here. Aha, but you're the director of sustainability, Draper. Come on, put your hand down. And you're not a student either. So I can just say, as a person who now can look back at a long, and as one of my old friends in US EPA used to say, a long and checkered career, both in the private sector and in public service. And the first thing that I'll tell you is that my direction was formed by the work that I did at Edinburgh University in Scotland, where I got an internship with one of the agricultural scientists who was covering a large part of agriculture in the east of Scotland. That was my summer job for 4 years. That developed my interest in pesticide research and development. That introduced me to the idea that I might be able to get a scholarship to study in the United States and get a master's degree. That introduced me to the possibility of a career doing academic research. And so I headed in that direction. I got my PhD at Oregon State. But did I ever teach at a university? No. What did I end up doing? I ended up regulating pesticides as a U.S. government employee. So that path that you maybe see unfolding in front of you as you're sitting here, and maybe you are thinking about what you're going to do after you graduate, it's not necessary that will be the path that you envision just now. But to me, the important thing is that you be prepared for different directions in that path. And everybody uses the phrase, well, you follow your passion. I suppose it's possible to be passionate about using herbicides to control the bracken fern in the east of Scotland. I don't know that I was that passionate about it, but what I found as a PhD student with a fellowship in environmental health sciences at Oregon State was that it was possible to be passionate about what was happening in the environment. This is in the late 60s. I mean, the environmental movement was in its first flush. I was at the first Earth Day in 1970 on Corvallis on the campus, where we were tabling as graduate students and trying to get other students interested in this concept of protecting the environment. And I was lucky enough to be able to spend 30 years doing that. The second thing was, as a local resident here in Sonoma County, as I was coming to the end of my career, I found that I also was extremely interested in the possibilities of how to make decisions that impact the lives of the people in the community in which I was living, and that's why I ran for city council 20 years ago. And I've retired for over 14 years now. I've had a chance to do things that I never would have dreamed of. When I was a young student in Edinburgh, Scotland, I ended up representing California at the climate conferences in Poland and Copenhagen in 2008, 2009. I'm going to be head of the Bay Area's Transportation Commission, hopefully in a short while. So I had no idea I was going to be the mayor of the city of Roanoke Park when I was 22 years old. So to me, there's all sorts of possibilities. And the best thing that I ever did was that internship in these summer months that got me in the company of a professional and out there doing the work. The second thing I'm going to say is I just was watching a panel next door, I think it was. And there were 4 individuals on that panel, one of whom is sitting right here, Justin. And I listened to them introducing themselves. How do you describe yourself? Are you a millennial or what are you, a generation Y, X, Z?
I don't know, but I'm turning gray.
Oh, you're turning gray. So how ancient are you?
43.
43. He was, I think, older than, were you older than anybody there?
Oh, I'm the oldest. For
Oh,
sure.
you're the oldest, yeah. And then a person I know very well, Lauren Casey, who comes out of an engineering program, who works for us in the Regional Climate Protection Authority, and she came from sort of, as she said, solving practical engineering problems to working in the public policy arena. And let's see, we had the North Bay Organizing Project. Davin was talking, and Tony from the Sonoma Ecology Center over in the Sonoma Valley. These are people who have relatively recently graduated from college. They had an idea of directions that they would go in, but they are all in jobs working towards environmental protection, affecting climate change. And I don't know what's happening over there, but never mind. That's basically what I had to say by way of introduction. Be prepared. If you can get an internship or work experience as you're going through the college experience, grab it, take advantage of it. And there are jobs out there. I was just sitting with 4 people who had moved into places where they are now passionately engaged in doing what they want to do, but they were all prepared to be selected for these jobs.
Thank you very much, Jay. How about that?
Thank you, Jake. Hi, my name is Trey Then with Daily Acts Organization. And first I'm going to start off with a couple quotes. Who here was at Bill McKibben's talk last night? Most of you. So you heard this one. So before that, I'll give you a quote by Howard Thurman, who said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive." And so touching on like what Jake said about following your passion. And the second one was McKibben's quote, loosely, because I tried to write it down as best I could, where he said, "The best science indicates that there's a chance we could keep things from getting out of control, but it's a narrow window and closing fast." And so recognizing people have bills to pay and sometimes debt and things, but I think looking more towards, and even if you don't know what it is, but committing to finding what your calling is. We live in this rare and precious planetary moment where there's never been a time when the power of your small choices have mattered more to be able to affect every generation to come. And so really thinking about like, what is it that I want to do? And so I'll give the quick advice of get engaged, volunteer, find and surround yourself with the people, the peers, the mentors who just amaze and inspire you with what they're doing and how they're living, and build the practical skills of local self-reliance, the practical skills of sustainability, because at the end of the day, we all need to be able to pay the bills, but starting to not have our world be completely centered around the money economy is pretty important as well. Is how do we actually meet our needs as people, as neighbors, as communities? And so for me, I started off, I was a passionate snowboarder in college, and that's what I really wanted to do after school. And I ended up going to work for Anderson Consulting, a Fortune 500 company, but what I really wanted to do was snowboard. So I quit my job and I moved to Tahoe, and I traveled and competed for a couple years. And at the same time, I was waking up to all our big environmental challenges and our social challenges. And so that, while I followed my passion for nature, connection, and snow, it was also about, I was just becoming more aware and wanting to do something, get more skilled, get more educated about the challenges. After snowboarding for a few years, and I went back to the corporate world for a little while longer, and it was a great job and good people and all those sort of things, made good money, but it definitely wasn't what I was meant here to do. And I didn't even know what that was yet, but I was really clear that that wasn't it. And so about that time, I had a great coworker named Paige, really good friend, super vibrant, bright person. She's probably like 23, 24. She was engaged to be married, and then all of a sudden she got sick. Next thing you know, I'm visiting her in the hospital, and her life is quickly slipping out of her fingers. And what she said to me was, don't wait for tomorrow or another day. Do what matters now. And so after that, it was enough initiative to quit my job and go, okay, I don't know exactly what it is I want to do in the environmental sphere, but I'm going to follow that. And so that led me just to finding more people that amazed and inspired me, and just sort of following a path, which I didn't even know was a path at the time, other than being around people who really inspired me and seeing these people doing incredible work to transform their lives and transform farms and regenerate forests. And that eventually led to founding Daily Acts. And so Daily Acts, as Ben said, is a local sustainability organization that works on helping people reclaim the power of our daily actions to live more sustainably. And we do everything from taking people on tours to show organic farms and gardens, green-built buildings, give them the smell and the touch and the taste and the voice and the face of this healthy and just and resilient world being born. And from there, we help them build practical skills. Here's how you do gray water. Here's how you do rainwater. Here's how you grow food. Here's how you transform a city hall landscape into an edible water-wise garden with rainwater catchment and community garden beds. And then from there, once we start having people build skills, we actually get people together, 20, 30, 50, 200 people, and we transform landscapes. We partnered with Roanoke Park on a Copeland Creek cleanup recently, which a lot of volunteers came out, got engaged, built skills, built relationships, felt a sense of agency to go out in a day and make something better. I like the dot thing that I heard last night. And so we've spent a lot of time doing that work and showing that you could turn small solutions into transforming homes and gardens and neighborhoods and city hall landscapes, even influencing local policy, all the way up to having a hand in state gray water policy. And through this, people are getting educated and they're getting inspired and they're building skills, and it's also creating demand for these sort of activities. And so recently we hired two Sonoma State graduates, one Dustin, who started Farmster, and another one, Liz, who worked in the JUMP program. And we met her because she volunteered at the Pocket Park Food Forest just down the street, which free public food if you go by there. And so we, building relationships, the volunteering piece, and how that could result in more skills and also the connections to get jobs. Two of our other former staffers started out as volunteers and then became interns and then became staff. And now one is the program director for the Permaculture Skill Center, and the other works for Lift Economy. They're both in their 20s, and she's a consultant helping green businesses, big green businesses, and green businesses get started. And a core part of her work, she reminded me the other day, is helping businesses be more successful, but also, again, trying to reduce our dependence on the strictly financial economy, rebuilding the economy of local food and social connections, that we could reduce resource use 60, 70, 80% and expense along the way and live more and live better. And we could be growing food and medicine and habitat and beauty in our homes, our gardens, our neighborhoods, our apartment complexes. It doesn't matter. You could do this everywhere. And so, we're creating these models and doing these trainings, but then also, again, this is creating demand. And so our phone rings off the hook for people wanting to hire businesses to do green landscapes or to do gray water systems. So there's green career pathways doing sustainability work, but that also gives you the skills of if, you lose a job, wage cut, whatever, you know how to grow food, you know how to reduce your expense, you know how to help neighbors and trade skills. Again, building sort of our personal and more community scale resilience. So that's an important part of our work. And then just, closing on a couple more bits I was having a conversation with Oscar Chavez recently, I believe worked with Lucy. He's the associate director for the Human Services Department of the county, and looking at how can we have these sort of landscapes throughout all of our neighborhoods, because again, we don't really know what the economy is going to do, given the climate crisis and all these big issues. But if we're creating green career pathways where we could transform our homes, our neighborhoods, our communities, and at the same time building the skills to meet our own needs, if and when we need to, that's a really good side benefit along the way. Knowing how to, again, grow our food, grow our medicine, treat our gray water, have chickens and bees in the backyard, make your own honey wine if you're 21 and you want to, or make your own cider. We make all kinds of fermented beverages. You refill bottles, saves energy. You don't have to buy it from the store. You make it with neighbors and friends. There's a ton of rich and amazing skills we could build and relationships we could build and things that we could grow by, again, taking back that power of our choices and not being so focused on just the money we need to make to survive, starting to change that paradigm. So I think I'll pass on to Justin next.
Thank you.
So I'm Justin Witt. I'm an environmental planner with a civil engineering firm here locally. A little different than most planners. I actually work in the private sector. Oftentimes planning is a public kind of occupation. I primarily do California Environmental Quality Act review for water, wastewater, and school projects. So I'm very focused on infrastructure rather than land use planning, for example. I also do the environmental permitting for most of our projects. So I work with the Regional Water Quality Control Board a lot, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. and California State Fish and Wildlife, as well as the county and the city jurisdictions. So a lot of different kind of interactions with agency types. I also work, well, I shouldn't say work, I volunteer with the North Bay Climate Protection or Adaptation Initiative, NBCI for short, who is linked up with the Regional Climate Protection Authority. They're an NGO, and through our efforts, we're trying to bring usable, scientifically backed information to the planning organizations in the county and in the cities to work towards climate adaptation. So how did I get where I am? That's always something I ask myself. Echoing Jake, education was a huge part of it. I started out with a BA in cultural anthropology, and halfway through that path, I realized if I had to study the human condition for the rest of my life, I'd probably end up in a straitjacket. So while I was in that coursework, I jumped into the geography department to kind of finish the requirements to move into a master's degree there. And that was natural resource management and environmental planning, which was a very generalist kind of specialty. So we look at a lot of very disciplined studies and then try to apply them generally to regions. Couple of things that, two courses in particular I took, which weren't really related to my minor or my BA or the MA, were medical anthropology. Kind of a weird subject matter, but it really brought to light to me how we interact with our environment and how our environment actually changes us as a species. And it's been fundamental to me to understand that there's an interaction there. We're not just changing it, but it will change us. The other was ecology. And talking to some of the engineers, engineers, they're not generally into ecology, but we've kind of decided that if everybody in college had to take ecology, the world would be a better place. Because you learn about, the interconnectivity of everything. You learn about things like nutrient cycles. You learn about keystone species and indicator species. All these things that the Earth says, hey, there's something wrong here, and you're not paying attention. And you can identify those things before things get bad, which is, really a very specific focus of a lot of science. And then the other thing I learned in education was there's a difference between specific focus and generalization. We absolutely need the specifics, but we also need the generalists to be able to connect the dots. So we need the big picture and we need the small picture to really understand the entire show. So while I was at San Francisco State, they had a student-led recycling resource center. It was early 90s. Recycling was just kind of taking hold, and it was a new thing on campus. And it was student-run, it was student-funded, and I slipped into that as, after working the glory jobs of washing dishes and making sandwiches and mowing lawns for most of my college career. I slipped into that and was kind of appointed by the group of people that were working there as kind of the leader of the thing. And I'm not quite sure how that happened, but I guess I knew how to run budgets. So we scraped together budgets through various funding organizations, and by showing the facilities operations that we could actually offset costs by reducing the waste stream. So that was sort of my first foray into environmental employment. While I was still doing my master's degree in San Francisco, we moved up to Healdsburg, which was probably a dumb choice, but sometimes that's the thing you do when you're young. So I had to commute back to the Bay Area I think it was every Monday or Tuesday night while I was working carpentry to pay the rent to finish that program. And during that time, I did something quaint and responded to a newspaper ad for an environmental planner, and ended up with the job while I was still finishing the program. And I learned a lot. There are some things that you can learn conceptually in college that you just are not prepared for until you actually sit down and try to fumble through it the first time. CEQA is one of those. The other is politics. You can study politics in college, but until you go to your board of supervisors meeting or your city council meetings and understand the elements that are involved, you'll never really truly appreciate it. So if I could advise all of you on one thing, if you're going into sustainability fields, figure out your local politics. It's really important. How am I on time? Okay. Couple thoughts on sustainability. I think it's a misused term for what we're doing here, because when you think about 7 billion people, sustainability doesn't really hit the mark, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for it. So I think, the conservation and environmental movement and resilience, those are all better terms probably than sustainability. towards what we're trying to achieve with climate adaptation. And it's a difficult goal to move into, difficult field, because it hasn't really been established. I think, as Bill McKibben said last night, we've pretty well gotten mitigation down. You know, we know how to do renewable energy. We know how to do infrastructure planning. We know how to do the things we need to do to mitigate CO2 emissions. But how do we get to a point where we understand clearly as a society how we kind of deal with what's already in the pipeline? Because we have 20 years of warming baked into the CO2 level we're at right now, which is a lot. And you all get to deal with it in your professional careers, so welcome to the club, I guess. I think that's all I have for opening.
Good afternoon. I'm Rebecca. I'm a senior power analyst at Sonoma Clean Power. Sonoma Clean Power is the default electricity provider for Sonoma County. We're a really exciting agency. We began service in May of 2014, and we have since reduced carbon emissions of electricity by 48% for our normal Clean Start program. We also have a program that you can voluntarily participate in, which is called Evergreen, which is 100% local renewable energy. That's energy that is supplied from the geysers, geothermal energy, and that energy has achieved an 88% reduction in emissions for the customers that voluntarily opt into it. We recently, just last week, were approved to expand into Mendocino County as well, and to start delivering an incentive program for electric vehicles. What I do for Sonoma Clean Power is I am responsible for long-term, annual, monthly, day-to-day, and hour-by-hour load forecasting of the electricity for all of Sonoma County. I'm also responsible for procuring that energy. And we procure that energy through a variety of sources: solar, wind, as I mentioned, geothermal, hydroelectric, and natural gas. So I guess along the lines of my other panelists, how did I get here? It's been an interesting career path for me, one that I didn't anticipate. I studied mechanical engineering at UC Santa Barbara. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no plan. Someone told me I was good at math and science. There were no women in that field, and so I decided I'd take the challenge and be different. Through 3 years of college, I still had no idea. I didn't enjoy my major. I just, pushed through it, and it wasn't until the summer between my junior and senior year that I knew how I was going to apply, or how I wanted to apply my degree. I obtained an internship at the Sustainable Buildings Industry Council in Washington, D.C., where I studied green building. And through my mechanical engineering training, I could utilize my skills to look at the systems within buildings to make them energy efficient. So my senior year in college, I decided to do my case study project on one of the buildings on campus that was going to be LEED green certified. So after graduating college, I think it was kind of the real birth of the green building movement when I graduated, and there weren't any jobs available. There was nothing. So what I did was I found a company in San Francisco that I wanted to work for. I approached them and I said, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I'll make copies. I'll do anything. I just want to learn. And they took me on 20 hours a week as an intern, and that led to a full-time position where I was able to travel all throughout California, auditing buildings and looking for energy efficiency measures. I kind of wasn't satisfied there. I wanted a more holistic knowledge of building systems and the built environment. So I moved to Sydney, Australia to get a master's degree in sustainable development. It was supposed to be a year-long program. I got a job, met a guy, stayed there for 5 years, and had a really, really rewarding and challenging career there that led me all over the world. I went to Malaysia, New Zealand, various parts of Asia, the UK, back to the United States, Tahiti. I did projects in Korea and South Africa, and it was just a very exhilarating, very high-paced or fast-paced, high-risk field that I was in, and I was actually in that career through the construction recession, and it was a very stressful process. But because my career was focused in the green building and sustainability, we actually thrived through that period. While I loved living in Australia and I absolutely loved what I was doing, I didn't really feel like I had a sense of community or was contributing to my direct community. So I eventually made my way back to California and worked for the Sonoma County Water Agency, where I worked on their reducing their electricity demand and getting to carbon-free electricity. I think we achieved that in 2015, I believe, right before I switched over to Sonoma Clean Power. At the water agency, I was also involved in the startup of Sonoma Clean Power and worked with Jeff, the CEO, and other members of the team. So it's kind of a natural move to go over to Sonoma Clean Power. And I can honestly say absolutely love my career, absolutely love going to work. I never thought I would be able to say that. I love that I have an impact on our community every single day. I love that I can apply my engineering skills, and I didn't mention that I recently received an executive MBA from Sonoma State as well. So I can use my business skills, I can use my engineering skills and my holistic sustainability knowledge every day in the work that I do. And so I would just say that it's a combination of going after what you want, taking some risks, and following opportunity as well. Just keeping your mind open and utilizing the skills that you have in a way that's positive for the environment. That is, and I guess what I've always say is it's not you don't necessarily have to have a career in sustainability. You can have a career in any field you choose and use your decision making to employ sustainable practices.
Thank you. Excellent story. Thank you for sharing. My name is Lucy Hernandez, and I guess if I were to start by introducing myself, I would say my mom would say to you that Lucy is this curious child that always knew that there was something out there in the world, but she just didn't know what it was, but there was a calling for her. And I actually sat right where you are sitting right now. And I actually went to the seminars. My teachers would tell me, you have to go, these are extra points, make sure you take notes and you write a paper. And I remember saying, wow, I need the points, I need to get this information to class, so I had to do it. But at the same time, as I was sitting in this class, I also was thinking of how am I going to make sure I have enough money this week to feed my child, which I had a 5-month-old as I sat there as a freshman in college. And I also thought about what is it I want to do? And I didn't. Just like Rebecca, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew there was 2 factors that were having me sit right where you are. And that is, 1, I was now a mother of a child as a teen mom. And 2, I had this group of people that believed in me. For some reason, they saw something. And remember, my mom would always say, you're a curious child. That wasn't always seen as a positive in my family. But this group of people that actually believed in me were the social service programs, my case manager, my community action case manager. I had a health nurse that would help me understand how to take care of my child and help me with food and clothing. I actually was a student that, just like many of you, we had maybe 25 cents to $1 to eat, a day. And I remember thinking, what is it? What's my calling? So I can't not go to school and get a full-time job and drop out because I have this group of people that believe in me, and that kept me going. Somebody said, you're very good at debating, you're very good at asking questions, and that curious mind actually works in college. So I found my peace. I found that I was able to do that. So I figured I'm going to be an attorney, and I'm going to go into public law, and I am going to go ahead and help teen moms just like me to be able to have a better service. And I thought about all the different things I can do, and I thought that was my calling. The reality is, as I was in college, I was also fascinated about the way people interacted with each other. And I realized that maybe a student that was sitting next to me, even though they may not know what I was dealing with, they were nice, polite enough to smile and ask, how's your day? Or maybe that person next to me actually went ahead and had an extra, chocolate bar or candy and said, do you want one? And I realized the impact that one person actually can have with the other actually makes your life much better. And I realized at that point that I was switching into a major that was in the field of social science. And so I got my degree at Chico State, so I know I'm sorry, but I am a Wildcat, Chico State in social science after I changed my major 2-3 times. And what I found is that because I had a group of people that believed in me and they believed that I had something to give into this world, I actually joined and I became a staff member in the Community Action Partnership Organization in Colusa Glen Trinity. How many of you have heard of Community Action Partnership? 1, 2, 3 people? I'll tell you, if you want to make a change for people and be part of a movement, just like I was right where you were a few years ago, actually I won't say how long, but a couple years ago, you will realize that I was looking for a calling. I was looking for something that I can be part of and I can help people. When I joined Community Action, I found it. And I actually started as a translator, case manager, and then moved up into a director position. I had an opportunity then at that point to look at utilizing my degree, which was a lot of that theory application, but I actually worked with staff. And what I found is, and that's passionate to me, was how to make you a better you. Because each of you have a talent. Remember, I was told that being curious was maybe not a good thing. But the reality is that was a talent that I've had since day one. And if I wasn't curious, and I never really wondered how people interacted and why things happen for a reason within organizations and in the office, I would have never gone to where I'm at today. Today, my children I have a college student, she's 22. I have my 18-year-old, a senior in Windsor High, and a freshman in Windsor High. And they all have been part of a movement of helping our community. And it's because mom and dad have always been there to make sure that we're showing and role modeling for them. So what I do today is I actually, as a consultant, after 18 years and working in this field, and let me just go back for a second. When I actually worked in my organizations, I worked in Colusa Glen Trinity, and then I transferred to Sonoma in 2013. I actually worked with my staff to look at their innovation and look at their talents. And I always looked at talent times investment. I invested time in coaching them, supporting them, and actually letting them blossom and grow, equated to that strength being developed in our organization. In 1 year, I was able to bring almost $1 million of non-traditional funding to our organization because I utilized my team very strategically, very different. I let them actually be the ones driving. I was just in the back. I was the coach. I was the cheerleader that was actually supporting them. I invested in believing in my staff and pulling those talents. And so to January of this year, I actually launched myself, and I was scared. I wasn't sure, but I knew that I love working with people and developing talent just like you have in this room. I see you, and I think of my children, and I think about, gosh, if they just saw the potential. But when you work in an organization, sometimes you start in positions that you're not sure if that's you. Sometimes we're on the same bus, but we're, in the wrong seat. That's what I come in to do with organizations now. So as of January, I launched myself as Lucy Consulting. And I actually, organizations bring me in to help them recalibrate. Executives are saying, I don't know what I'm dealing with. I have 4 generations in the workforce. They're not getting along. I have millennials coming in. They have a different skill. I don't know how to utilize them. I don't know how to develop them. I come in and I actually help develop leadership development for all staff at all different levels and basically bring back the organization to be more focused on outcomes. And when I come into outcomes, I'm going to give you an example of a project I'm working on right now with one of my clients. and that is looking at using our reentry, our people in the jail, our men and women in the jail that are currently serving time, and utilizing them to develop tiny home projects. And piloting something where we actually have now funding to be able to start building these tiny homes and start piloting and having these tiny homes give them construction trade skills, because they're going to be coming out and they are going to need a job, and then be able to give this back to our homeless population. I always thought about return on investment. So my staff, when I prepare them on programs, I always look at, think about the impact in our local economy, but also think about the impact you're making in this world. Because just like Adele said, we're not going to be here for long. We're not going to be here forever. But you are. And you're setting now the foundation that we need. And if you haven't been told this, just know that that talent that maybe somebody's told you one time, gosh, you talk too much, or you're always trying to figure things out you shouldn't do. Think about embracing that and actually thinking that that is a talent that we actually need. You're a gift. You're an asset to this world. The question is, are you ready to share that? Thank you.
A panel of great professionals and fabulous human beings. Please help me say thank you to them before I pass the word to you. So, questions for them?
Hello. This is a question. I didn't quite catch your name, the second speaker. Yes. What was your name?
Trey Then.
Traythan? Traythan? Okay. Hi. So you spoke about how working at a local level with community, like kind of community-based and like educating people. It's almost sounded kind of like, you know, in case there's an apocalypse, people could like survive off the land type of thing. Not quite at that level, but I did think that was pretty awesome. I understand like that at the local level it gets more personal, and that helps individuals. But I'm just curious as to what you think, local versus state versus federal, in terms of, you know, moving people. Just like you know what could we do at the state level? Just about that.
That's perfect. I'm so glad you asked that, because there's a piece that I didn't mention that I wanted to. And similar to what Bill McKibben was saying last night, of the power of individual actions have to be in unison with something larger. It could be local or beyond. And so Daily Acts is focused in Sonoma County programmatically, but then we serve in a leadership position in the NorCal Regional Resilience Network. I serve on the board of the California Urban Water Conservation Council, which is a combination of nonprofits and state agencies. And then I'm the board chair of Transition US, which is a national organization that's a part of the International Transition Towns movement, with 1,000 groups in 50 countries. And so the grassroots do have the power of the local, but we have to connect and strengthen that local. And so we do a lot around program replication and leadership development. And on the bigger, hairier goal for us is a lot of these nonprofits, they're not even nonprofits yet, they're volunteer-based groups. And so our goal is to really help build out the field, or this movement of these grassroots groups that are working with local agencies, local organizations, local businesses, but to be able to, because a lot of them are volunteer-based, they're not necessarily, a third of our budget comes from working with city government per se to implement water conservation programs that also do stormwater, community engagement, food. And so that's new for a lot of agencies all over the place. And when I speak at conferences, they're like, that's great, we want to hire you, will you work in our community? But Daily Acts doesn't want to work in San Diego or another state. What we want to do is partner with organizations who are able to do that work, do those city contracts, build up a skilled force of engaged people where they are, and to be able to really work together at those different scales. And so one of our programs is the Community Resilience Challenge, which has been inspired over 40,000 actions and projects and pledges across the country. We do our piece locally, but we partner with groups all around the region, the state, and the country who are doing it as well. And so we're very much trying to help make the case to grow grassroots groups who are doing this work in other places, and partner with agencies to help them understand the power of hiring and working with local organizations in their communities. Does that answer your question a bit? Okay.
On a much more mundane level, since you mentioned both state and federal government, the one thing that I would add to these comments is that one of the reasons it's satisfying for me working as an elected official in local government is that we are the instrument by which things get done. We're responsible under law for making sure that our citizens are protected from flood and fire and other disasters. So you will find, working for the city of Roanoke Park, for example, that you would be working cooperatively with the Daily Acts group. You would be interacting then with the next level of government at county with the Sonoma County Water Agency, who hires people from Sonoma State, who hires people who work in the youth ecology program. And these people, both local in the cities, local in the county, then are interacting. Oh, there's a yellow sign. It says 5. They're interacting with the state agencies who have responsibility in the state of California for climate adaptation, the Natural Resources Group under John Laird, the Department of Food and Agriculture under Karen Ross, the California Environmental Protection Agency, and up into the realms of the federal government. So since we're talking about careers, there's a whole sort of series of steps of possible careers that are open. And let me tell you, there are also the baby boomers. You may have heard, and I'm not even a baby boomer. I'm too old to be a baby boomer. I'm a silent generation, believe it or not. But the baby boomers are all retiring. And what does that mean? That means there's jobs. There have to be replacement people to come in with modern skill sets, and one would hope with passion to work in what seems to be somewhat mundane, but frankly where a lot of the action is, and that's in local and state government. So that's my recruiting pitch.
Thank you, Jay.
We have time for one or two more. Anybody? Let me go right here.
Hi. So I guess I kind of have two questions, and it can be directed to anybody. Is it safe to say that most of your organizations are funded by federal grants? And if so, do you have any information on resources that could improve grant writing? Because I know that is really important for especially NGOs. You have to get good at writing grants because you need money to start up a project.
You know, in the human services world, we look at becoming experts in leveraging. And so one of the things that I did is I was self-teaching myself on how to write a grant because there wasn't really anyone to transition or help me. And I was responsible for these communities. But one of the things that I did do is in my master's program, I ended up taking a grant writing class. And what I did is it gave me some of the philosophy of it. But what I took from there is I actually started meeting and taking people in the community that I wanted to be like for coffee, and I would ask them for their advice. And one of the things once again, that curious mind, how did it work for you? Give me those pitfalls, the lessons learned. And what I did is when I prepared my first grant, I actually had asked some of these individuals to please, if they would mentor me. And I sent them my first grant, and my first grant was for $60,000. And this is a program that we were going to be able to leverage some local dollars with some federal dollars. So our project would have been it's $120,000, and that was in the CalFresh world, CalFresh outreach, and that helped me start building myself in grant writing. And then throughout, I've been able to master that. But once again, a support system. Look at the individuals. You have many experts in here that are running organizations that are really grassroots, and they've built upon that. These are the individuals that I would say have a gift. once again, they have a talent, and if you were to connect with them, they would probably share with you also how. And I welcome anyone that would like to sit down, and I can show them some of the basics as well of grant writing, and then help you as you transition.
So obviously, the thing that's happening with climate change is really affecting a lot of people, including our generation, and it's going to be something that we're going to be dealing with. But something that I think about, and something that Bill McKibben mentioned yesterday, was there are even younger generations of students who are students and just kids who are going to be facing more and more problems as CO2 levels rise, and et cetera, et cetera. So my question is, how do you have, or do you have, that conversation with younger groups about climate change and what it really means? Because some of that stuff is really scary, and it's very troubling, but it's also true. And it's important that that conversation is had at a certain point. But I have a younger brother who asks me why I'm majoring in what I'm majoring here, an ENSP major here, and ultimately it's to combat climate change, but what that actually means is a totally different conversation, and it's a very sensitive one. So how do you have that conversation? That's directed to just about anybody.
Just personal story. My daughter's 13, and I've begun the conversation with her. She's certainly not old enough to go into the doom and gloom of it, but she is old enough to hear from her parents that her world may not be exactly the way I've experienced it, and it may not be the way that you're going to experience it. As you say, there's a generational thing, and it's if we don't manage our CO2 emissions, it's going to get worse every generation, and that's a novel thing for us as a species. So I think that you have to be cautious to not introduce hopelessness, because that's not what we're trying to do. We have to strive towards success, because that's hope. That's what keeps us going. And we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our children, and we owe it to each other to do that.
Just happy to chime in really quickly on that. I think inspiration and urgency are really important. Like you heard me up front, we live this incredibly rare and precious and imperiled planetary moment. And so speaking with passion and honesty about the scale of the issues, but giving people a sense of hope. And there's just epic work being done 24 hours a day in every nook, cranny, and watershed on this planet. Radical regeneration. There's so many amazing solutions. And so introducing people to that as well as just the big, gloomy problem statements. It's a really amazing time to be alive, though it is a very challenging one. And so inspiration and urgency together.
Well, thank you all. I will close with two brief things. First, a schedule change. The 1 o'clock session is going to be here instead of across the hall. Second, Lauren Casey, who's the Director of Climate Programs at the Regional Climate Protection Authority, when she saw there was a careers panel following her panel, she left her card and said, "We're hiring." So her card is up here. You can come look at it if you want. And I invite you to come talk with the panelists individually. You can invite Lucy or any of the others out to coffee, as she suggested, and help me give them a round of applause.